Today we're back in the Robocop franchise for movie number 3. This is the one that everyone likes, right? Sure, Peter Weller's not here, it's more aimed at children, and they throw away other important characters like trash, but hey, Robo Jetpack. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast, and today we're returning to a franchise that we've been chipping away at over the last 7-8 months. I think we started it, but today we get into Robocop 3. So we did the original, we did 2, which is got a fan base. It's not obviously as loved as the original, but there's some merit there. And then 3 is the one that people villainize. 1993 was a year where Robocop 3 and Beverly Hills Cop 3 both came out, and like people actually maybe that was 94. Doesn't really matter. Either way, like those threes are movies that people of a certain age like vilify as this is where sequels just went off the rails and when things went too far and blah blah blah. So we're going to dive into this today. David watched it for the first time. I grew up watching all 3 of the original Robocop movies, so I've got a slightly different perspective coming in, and we'll see how it goes. But we will start spoiler free in case you haven't seen Robocop 3 and you're concerned about spoilers. We will, placate you. But yes, we're going to get into it. So starting spoilers free. We'll give you warning before spoilers, and of course if you are enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch if you do, and you can get bonus shows every month on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So plus David's got his homework movie at the end. I never say that at the start, but I should say it so people know there's a little gift at the end, a little surprise.
I think you last said it like 20 episodes ago, and I just accepted that like, oh, that's just never coming back. All right.
Once every quarter, give or take.
Oh, yeah.
I'll do it.
Just a reminder that I'm putting myself through the extra paces to try to catch up on things.
Yes. So, yes, we'll get into things. Robocop 3, Peter Weller is not here. He did not come back for the third movie.
Yeah, I will say, I don't know the actor who they got. I'm not familiar with Robert John Burke, at least not by name, but once all the makeup and prosthetics are on, he looks the same. He does a good job of looking the same, but
it's the voice.
It's the
voice that's more noticeable. Funny enough, I did not know who this actor was for a long ass time, but I actually know who he is now because he was a recurring character in several seasons of Person of Interest, which I've been working through. So that was kind of a weird moment where I went, who's playing Robocop in this? And I saw his face, and I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize what he looks like now because Person of Interest wasn't that long ago. So
fair enough.
Yeah, so we got him as Robocop. Nancy Allen is back as Lewis, but we have a lot of new characters in this one. And some surprising faces, some bigger than others, but there's even some small roles in this that I kind of did a double take because I was like, oh, it's that guy from Frankenhooker is in here just being sexist for like 30 seconds, but
I didn't recognize the Frankenhooker guy, but I did have that moment with several other characters in this movie.
Oh, that's why I mentioned that one, because I knew that wasn't going to be one that you recognized. Right. But he's just got this thick New Jersey accent. He sounds just like he does in Frankenhooker, and I watched that not too long ago, so that was... the sentence, "this super crack will get the job done much quicker," was just in my brain when he popped up on screen. If you want context for that line, watch Frankenhooker. It's like a weird grindhouse version of Poor Things, but well worth your time. So anyway, the basic premise of Robocop 3 is that a Japanese company is taking over OCP, and as part of this push, they're trying to eject all the civilians in this district of Detroit, or Delta City, whatever we're using now, so they can build their new Delta City. And they're claiming on the news, of course, that this is all peaceful and it's all nice and everyone's getting, you know.
They're explicitly saying like, oh, we're ejecting people. We're just taking all the troublemakers out of the town. That's all we're doing. And then you explicitly see, oh no, they're just pulling everyone out. Yeah,
they're just going through neighborhoods and pulling people out of their houses, and that's all they're doing. So we got lots of villains. We have like a resistance group of characters who are trying to fight back against this, and then Robocop is caught up all in the middle of this going on. So that's the basic gist of what the plot is doing, but there's a lot of characters that we'll mention as we talk through it and whatnot. I don't want to go through all of them just now, But young Bradley Whitford is here, so that's a weird thing that I didn't remember being in this.
Yeah, he was just sitting there. He didn't say a word to begin with when he first introduced, and I'm like, okay, that's just some random lackey. And then he speaks, and you immediately recognize it as like, oh, okay, hey.
It's yeah. Rip Torn's the head of OCP now in this, so you might recognize him. I think people who are younger probably will know him from Men in Black more than anything. But yeah, he's there. The other weird random little pull is one of the cops early on is played by Shane Black.
Is he? I missed that one.
Yeah, as in the director of like Iron Man 3 and The Nice Guys and all that. But was also in Predator, so yeah, he has acted before, but just a weird little cameo there that I didn't see coming. Jeff from Curb Your Enthusiasm is like the owner of a diner in a couple of scenes.
Oh yeah, Carlin is his last name. I can't remember his first name. Yeah.
Stephen Root's in this as one of the Resistance guys. There's just lots of like random faces from like here or there.
Yeah. Just to throw in my two, CCH Pounder, which is very famous, I believe, from The Wire, or maybe it was S.H.I.E.L.D. I can't remember.
It's The S.H.I.E.L.D. I've seen both shows. It's The S.H.I.E.L.D.
And then Mako, I think it's Mako. He is, as you may know him from 2 Conan movies, but I think most people would know him as the voice of Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
2 Conan movies? What do you mean I would know him from 2 Conan movies?
I assume you watched the Conan movies, Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer.
I've seen like half of the first one.
Really? Oh, I thought your Schwarzenegger vibe would have sent you on that. Never mind.
Yeah, but I don't like fantasy, so yeah.
Oh, that's fair. I didn't realize that the Schwarzenegger love was under the fantasy hate.
Look, even he couldn't get me through a typical fantasy movie, all right?
That's fair. All right, fine.
I was like, what are you talking about? I would know him from the Conan movies.
I just thought it was sorry. My bad.
Yeah, I have no idea who you're talking about. Who's this Mako?
Mako. He is the head of the Japanese company.
Ah, okay.
Yep.
So yeah, plus there's a kid, which is what everyone talks about when they talk about Robocop 3, is that there's a kid main character who is there for the audience or the younger audience to relate to or something, because we're going full PG-13 with this one.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, I get it. I understand that Robocop, even from the first movie, was immediately corporatized of, we're going to sell as many action figures and toys as humanly possible. But this is the first time that it feels like, okay, no, this is one that theoretically kids could go to see, because there is significantly less gore and like overarching themes of just hyper violence throughout.
Yeah, and swearing obviously has been dialed back considerably.
I mean, it's still there, but yes, it's dialed back.
It was kind of a trend at this time, but I think with Robocop especially, they realized that it was one of those franchises, despite being very R-rated, that, yeah, there was toys being sold and stuff like that. But the funny thing is, though, is that the reason why a lot of kids, I think, liked Robocop is because it felt like something they shouldn't be watching. And if anything, the people who were a bit young to be watching it when the first Robocop came out, by the time Robocop 3 came out in 1993, presumably a lot of them would have been old enough to go see an R-rated movie anyway. You're kind of almost appealing to the next generation of kids by trying to make it kid-friendly, which is a weird thing, because you're just going to annoy everyone who is older and cares about it already.
It's just regressing the franchise back. It's honestly, I can understand why it didn't work out that well for them. This
is such a funny conversation to be having today, because a little peek behind the curtain here. Tomorrow, because we're doing an extra recording day this week, we're on a collector's cut, we're doing the 4th Die Hard, and we're going to be having a very similar conversation.
Oh, good.
Tomorrow as well.
Ah, fantastic.
Yes. Not so much about being kid-friendly specifically, but more about getting down to a PG-13 and taking out swearing and stuff like that. So just a weird back-to-back in the schedule there for us. But yeah. So anyway, without getting into anything else, we'll get some general feelings and whatnot out of the way. So David, what did you think of Robocop 3?
I didn't hate it. I mean, I know coming into this, the consensus and whatnot, here's the biggest problem, I think, for me, is that this movie lacks nuance. This movie, the previous 2 movies, there was this underlayer of, yes, it is a capitalist hellscape, and this corporate entity wants to rule this entire city and whatnot, but there was this underlying level of like, this is how it is in the real world as well, and we're just not at this point directly yet, and it was able to like pull some punches for that. This one, like, all of the people are like, yeah, no, corporate stuff is bad, and like there's a clear good guy and a clear bad guy, and there isn't really this weird blending of saying that corporate stuff is kind of not going away. It's very much definitively saying like, and if you rise up and act as like the people, then you can take it out. So there was this weird lack of nuance to it. Again, moving down to PG-13 definitely hurt it in terms of what I think the core beginnings of Robocop were. So you're alienating a bit of the audience with that. And then by the time the end of this movie hits, it's a toy commercial. It is absolutely just pitching out like, here's they literally have a toy commercial in the middle of the movie for a fake toy, and then follow it up with a third act that is nothing but an actual toy commercial. So it has its problems, but I think the thing that I didn't hate about it so much was that it felt like the natural next step in a lot of ways. After seeing all the stuff that the police went through in the first two movies, and then, again, I can't spoil that much, but what happens between the end of the first act going into the third act here, it felt like it made sense to me that this would be where things continue. Because one of the problems I had with Robocop 2 was that it felt like nothing had really progressed. There was no difference. Like even the police being on strike was still just directly carried over from the first movie. I like the fact that this had a next step to it, and it felt like it was actually continuing on the story of what would happen logically next down this line. So, I mean, again, I don't hate it. The kid's actually not that big of a problem for me. I don't think there was really that much of a problem having the kid around. So all in all, I'd say it's probably more middle of the road, but nowhere near as hated as I feel like it has been.
That's interesting. I didn't know really get into this viewing how I was going to come out feeling on the other end. Like I mean, it's obviously the worst of the three. I don't think there's any debate on that.
I don't know. I would have to go back to RoboCop 2, but I don't remember any fond feelings about that one really. I thought it was just kind of boring.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, okay. Clearly David's a weirdo and prefers RoboCop 3 to 2. But yep. For most people, 3 is easily the worst of the bunch, if nothing else, just because the actual filmmaking and execution of scenes, like the actual interactions Robocop has with people, are just worse in this. Everything just is lesser in that sense. But I didn't know how I was going to feel, because it's kind of in this weird place for me because I grew up with them, and I'm in this very specific window in time where I'm not old enough to have been around for Robocop 1 coming out in theaters, being a fan of Robocop 1, and then being like a, quote unquote, an intelligent fan waiting for Robocop 3, and then being slapped with this in 1993. Because I imagine people who were of a certain age just hated this when it came out, and I can understand why. And at the same time, I grew up in a time though where all 3 movies existed, and maybe the kiddie elements of this probably appealed to me when I was watching this at 7 years old, right, in a way that it doesn't work for adults. And I mean, yeah, the kid stuff is like, I don't like despise it, but it does feel out of place watching it now. So I went into this genuinely not knowing, because I haven't seen it in probably 15, 20 years. Like, am I going to be on the side of, oh, this is absolute poison, like how, like this deserves every bit of the reputation that it has, right, or am I going to come out going, you know what, it's not great, but it's not like the worst thing ever either? And I feel like where I've landed is a bit in between. I think I'm more negative than you are, because you've come out sounding surprisingly positive here, but yeah, I don't necessarily think I treat it as the poison that the reputation is. But I will say there was large stretches of this movie where I was sitting going, I'm just kind of bored, because like nothing about the way the story's progressing is that interesting. It's a shame, because I do think there is some raw ideas in here that I think are fine. Like, so the idea of Robocop effectively been forced into a position where he's choosing to whether or not to side with outsiders who are fighting the establishment versus the establishment. And that choice being something he gets to make is actively an interesting place to take the character. Yep. But so much of it is just kind of dressed up in kind of cheese and like you say, selling more toy variations of Robocop and other things and whatnot. There's moments in here where I go, you know what? I can see what they're going for with this bit. I see the potential. And part of that's because Basil's back doing the music from the first movie, so we got the main themes all back again, and some new themes as well. And the music's pretty good, and there's moments where I'm like, oh, if this was like a good version of this script, right? I could see there being a great version of Robocop 3. I think as it is, it's just kind of... it almost does feel bizarrely like OCP in the real world just watered it down too much for it to actually land any of the ideas that it's really going for. And maybe part of that is that it just doesn't have the nuance, but a part of it is missing its edge. It feels like, you know, more of a cartoony kind of take on Robocop. Everything about it feels a little bit less violent, of course, but, you know, less bite, less grit to it.
But I almost feel like the movie was to some extent self-aware of what it was doing. Obviously it doesn't help its case, but I do think it was to some level intentional, because like I said, there is an actual literal toy commercial in the middle of this movie for some of the police officers, the rehab agents, as they're called. And it's a cartoon. It is a children's cartoon that has this cartoonish violence to it. And it almost feels like a level of self-parody where they are saying like, no, this is what we're marketing for now. This is it. This is actually what it is. So I feel like there is a little bit of a self-awareness there that, again, it doesn't have the full edge to it because it is cutting out the gore, it is cutting out this hyper-violence, but it does have a different type of satire it's going for in a certain way.
I think it's fair to say they're trying to do that. I don't know if I can agree that they remotely succeed. Like, you can say something is somewhat self-aware, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's done anything with that self-awareness.
Right. Yeah.
You know? It feels like any ideas that were here that were genuinely great at some point, and I know Frank Miller eventually did a comic book based on his original script. I know Fred Dekker, the director of this, has been involved in other good things and was basically blacklisted for decades after this movie. It ruined his career.
Wow.
He eventually bizarrely helped write the script for The Predator, which was not a good movie. So his comeback wasn't exactly, but you know, he worked on Night of the Creeps.
Yeah.
He worked on Monster Squad, and done some other little touch-up work here or there in the 80s. But this movie, after this, he's got like a couple of random TV writing credits, and that's it.
That's so surprising to me. Like, why? I understand, like, directors getting, like, blacklisted if a movie just absolutely tanks it. But, like, even us both sitting here are saying, like, yeah, you know, middle of the road, not terrible.
Yeah, well, you said middle of the road. I would say bad.
All right, fair. But still, you're not coming at it with, like, the poison to the franchise, like you're saying.
No, but I can totally see why this was it, though. I can see why there wasn't anything after this.
I mean, I can see why there wasn't anything after this, like, just from a viewpoint of they regress the franchise back. Like, again, that idea that you start off marketing towards a certain audience, kids are growing up with it even if they're not supposed to. But then when you move the age dial back, you're missing the entirety of your audience now because the kids have grown up and the adults don't get anything out of it either. I understand why it wouldn't have done well, but I don't think it's absolute, like, heresy to the idea of RoboCop as a whole.
This is oddly defensive.
It is. I was going through this and I kept expecting the moment, like, something to happen in there where I was just going to roll my eyes and say, this is garbage. And yes, I agree with you that there are long stretches of this where, like, pacing wise, it probably could have used some touch-ups. I think I was bored at some points, but I remember thinking back to RoboCop 2 that script, the plot that was given, felt so disjointed and it felt so piecemeal together that it barely felt like a cohesive movie. This, at the very least, was a cohesive beginning to end, and it felt like there was an arc. There was, yes, were they selling toys? Of course, but, like, they actually managed to set up an entire story that felt like the people of Detroit / Delta City coming together. And I think that that's miles ahead of whatever RoboCop actually did there. Did RoboCop 2 have better fight scenes and gore stuff? Absolutely. But in terms of story, this one is miles ahead.
I could see what you're saying. I don't think I agree, though, in the sense that you're saying that it only had better action scenes and gore and stuff like that. I think it goes beyond that. RoboCop 2 has genuinely interesting ideas constantly being thrown at you. Now, are they disjointed? Yes, they are. I'm not going to argue with that. We talked about that in depth when we talked about RoboCop 2. But RoboCop 3, like, it's almost too simplistic, like what it's went with. Right? And like, I'm not necessarily against it being a little bit more heart swelling, right? The idea that you maybe lose a little bit of the cynicism as you go on because he's becoming more human or something like that. Like, you can kind of argue for that, I think, in the story. But Robocop 2 is a far more interesting movie to watch from start to finish. Now, I do think there was like 10-20 minutes at the start of this where I was like, oh, this is quite interesting watching what they're doing with this, even if it's not good, just from like oh, this is how the franchise fell apart and like these weird choices they made. But it stopped being interesting. Like, once I get out of Act 1 of this movie, it started just being a bit of a chore to sit through, waiting for the big beats to come. Because I knew what the big beats were going to be, and not just because I remembered them from like old viewings of the movie. Like, it was just kind of clear, this is what the beats are going to be. They've set it up. It's pretty predictable. And predictable isn't inherently bad, but it's when that's all you've got and you're just waiting for them to happen, then it just feels like you're waiting. It just feels like you're sitting through bad pacing to get to that point. And obviously there's some stuff we're dancing around here, but I will say there is a decision they've made that happens by the end of Act 1 that is, you know,
a choice.
It's a choice, and it's not one that I particularly like. There's a couple of weird little moments as well sprinkled throughout of just like, that was a weird little implication you put in that one scene. Okay, we'll talk about that later too. So, yeah, like, it's just, like, I don't think it's the worst sequel I've ever seen, right? And there's some people who definitely talk about it like it is, I don't know, like the Alien Covenant of their franchise, right?
Didn't I defend that one too?
I did, because you're an absolute tit, as it turns out.
Maybe the issue here is you keep hyping these up too much, like they're too bad, and I'm going in expecting extra reels territory, and then I come out of it of like, no, it's all right. I
don't think I hyped this one up that much though, because I don't feel that strongly about Robocop 3.
You didn't.
Whereas Alien Covenant, like I hate that movie. I freaking hate that movie. Yeah. This, you know, I think there is much worse than the realm of sequels, right? I think when you put it into perspective, I think people who think this is one of the worst sequels they've ever seen, like, do not see a lot of bad movies. I think if you're a connoisseur of bad movies, this is like, this is below that good line. Absolutely. It's not good. I think it is legitimately, yes, it's kind of bad. But I think if you watch a lot of bad movies, this isn't even like scratching like what really horrendous can be. It's just really watered down and it's kind of in the same way that I feel really kind of just bored by a lot of like some of the later bland MCU movies. I think this is worse than those in some ways, because I think those at least have like they've got like a sort of mediocre threshold they all seem to hit and no more, like really consistently, which is part of why they're so boring. But this is a bit below that, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is like on the same level, but it kind of reminded me of watching those in some ways, because it's like, oh, this is just the soulless one that has absolutely no spark to it whatsoever. Yeah. And I mean, that's just kind of sad and dull.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I don't want to come into this as defensive as I'm being of it. I don't want to come into it saying that I think it's high art. I don't think that it's doing something that is like, it's truly the writers had something to say here. No, it felt like they were doing a cash grab because RoboCop was selling. Like, clearly that's what was going on here. But in terms of sequels, in terms of like how this franchise could have gone, I could have seen a million different ways that this could have been so much worse. And I think what would have disappointed me the most is if they had just done the same thing again. Like, if they had done, oh, the police are on strike, crime is rampant, RoboCop's the only one who can come in and save it. And I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad that there is, as much as you're saying, a very simplistic plot, it is at least something that feels like a step forward in, if OCP continued to get its way, what would the rest of the city do?
No, I see what you're saying, and I actually agree. I'm glad they did try and take things forward and do something different. I think the problem here, though, if the execution's not good, then it doesn't matter.
No, that's fair.
Right? You know, the execution is the problem here. It's not necessarily the most of the core ideas are by and large fine. There's some like stupid things where like, oh, this kid's a miracle kid who can hack into this and do that, and it's like, okay, whatever. But
I feel like that's just something that was in the 90s where all the parents realize that their kids are like growing up with computers and they know how to handle these things. It's like, oh, well, clearly one day these kids are just going to be able to hack the Pentagon.
Well, there's a line actually like halfway or so through the movie, when someone's working on Robocop, and she says, Dr. Lazarus is a character we'll talk about properly in spoilers, but she says, oh, and this will read commands off your hard drive. And I went, hard drives don't give commands? What are you talking about, writers? Like, and clearly this was written, this is that's such a 90s thing, where computers were starting to be really a big thing, but a lot of regular, normal people, for lack of a better term, people who weren't using computers yet, were having to write dialogue about computers, and it's just laughable, some of the things that movies in the 90s have them say.
Was it the same year? I think it was the same year of, it's a Unix system. I know this.
Yes, that's Jurassic Park, I believe, if no one's following the reference. Yeah, it's just one of those little things where it's not even like a big line, it's not even like a big plot point, because it's not like they're setting something up where it's pivotal to what happens later. It's just a throwaway line of her explaining how two things are connecting. It'll take commands off your hard drive. Like, the hard drive just stores data. That's all it's doing. There's no commands coming from it.
Man, I want a supercut of every tech film, well, not even tech, but everything with cybernetics in the early 90s, and I just want to see how many insane things are said.
I think you're being generous by thinking it's just the early 90s. I think it goes all the way up. I think there's a turning point at the millennium where, okay, enough people are using computers in day-to-day life where we're cutting down on some of the stupid shit that people keep saying.
There was a clip from NCIS. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there was a clip.
I know the show. I don't know if I know the clip.
Oh, that's fine. The clip is two characters. They're the computers at the headquarters or whatever are getting hacked, and then two characters who are both good with computers both hop onto the same keyboard and start typing simultaneously to try to outdo the hack. And that, I think that was like 2006, 2007, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's definitely, maybe not two people specifically, but there's this idea of you make like two hackers like fighting against each other seem exciting by having them both type really fast, as if, oh, they're countering each other's moves but with a keyboard.
No. You want to outdo a hack, it's literally just, oh, someone got into our system 6 months ago, that sucks.
Yeah, if you wanted to hack, unplug the computer.
There you go. Which actually is how the scene ends. Yeah. Although I'm pretty sure he just unplugs the monitor, which, whoops.
Or unplug the router at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all you need. Just disconnect it from the internet. There you go. Hack over. Easy peasy. Anyway. Yes. So, yeah. It's. There's also a bit more of a turn to like the sense of humor in this, and this maybe goes along with it being a bit more kid aimed. But there's a lot more silly kind of jokes in this one. It felt like to me.
Yeah, I mean, there is one or two that take that darker turn, and we'll get to them. There was one in specific that just, it was so out of nowhere, and like, it was barely even a joke, but it was like played so dark, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Guess we're getting back into that for a second here.
Yeah, like for example, just the broad strokes, there's like a pimp mobile that Robocop drives at one point, and it's just like, oh, we wanted this insane visual of him in the pink car, and that's all it is. It's just, you know, honestly, it's a little bit Terminator 3, like the way the humor's coming in and kind of messing it up.
I could see that. It's been a while since I've seen Terminator 3, but I do remember the humor being a little bit for me.
Oh, I'm sure you'll get to the homework eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Whenever the next Terminator movie's coming out, I'll get there.
That's a threat. I don't want to think about the next Terminator movie coming out.
One other thing, just in terms of talking about the lack of nuance, is that the rehab agents that are introduced here. Thank you. Yes, they are 100% just Nazi coded, and like I'm pretty sure like the leader has a British accent as well, so it's given like this sort of foreign agent vibe instead of like the American heroes that these cops are.
Which is so stupid because yes, the English accent is what we associate with Nazi Germany.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so stupid. Literally, the UK were fighting Nazis before America was.
Yep. But as long as they're foreign, that just makes them evil. Same thing with the Japanese company. Like I think that there was a little bit of subtext there because obviously in the early 90s is where the Japanese tech boom was coming into play.
Sure.
So the idea that, here's this Japanese company that took over OCP, which was the American-made company. A little bit of subtext there, but for the most part, it felt like it was just, hey, we know OCP is evil. Meet an even more evil company.
Yeah, that was the weird thing about it, is that because OCP's already been so evil, like throughout the franchise, it's like, the Japanese company's not going to be any worse, really. Like, if anything, I mean, otherwise we can't spoil anything, but the ending does something weird with the Japanese company side of things, which we'll talk about, I guess. But yeah, very strange. Anyway, I think we're dancing around spoilers now, so it's probably time to dive in.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I would want to comment just beforehand is that this movie, I think a big part of why the second act is just so slow is that they have a significant lack of Robocop doing anything in this movie.
Yeah, he does kind of like either just sit there or disappear at weird times, and there's some odd moments as well where they make like one of what's supposed to be the most intimidating villain look kind of like an idiot because of the way they structure things and like the stuff plays out. So again, I'll clear up what those thoughts are in spoilers, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, is a morbid curiosity. I didn't hate watching this again, but next time I'm watching Robocop and maybe think, oh, I'll watch Robocop 2 as well. I kind of like that one. Will I watch Robocop 3 too? Probably not. It's.
I mean, honestly, for me, I still had problems with Robocop 2. I think just watching the first one's fine. I think Robocop 2 is like, if you've got the time, maybe, but I wouldn't suggest going for a full trilogy run at any point.
No, Robocop 2, like, you don't have to. Like, it's not like Halloween. There's Halloween sequels I quite enjoy, but like, if I'm recommending stuff to people, I'm like, the only thing you need to watch is Halloween 1. Like, it's a standalone movie. Forget that they turned it into a franchise where they're milking the teat over and over again. It's just Halloween. And enjoy it as it is. And Robocop was similarly made as a standalone movie that has a definitive ending, and even the existence of a sequel kind of waters down the ending of that original, so it's even better viewed on its own, just in a vacuum. And forget that anything else exists. Because, you know, when it was made to be in a vacuum on its own. It wasn't made with the idea of we're going to do the continuing adventures of Robocop. Which is kind of sad that I feel like movies that get made now have to go in with that knowledge that it might happen. Whereas at least back then I believe that, oh no, when they made the movie, like, okay, I'm sure they thought if it's a hit, they might want to do a sequel. But I don't think they wrote it with any of that kind of, you know.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was some, like, it was Alfred Molina. He was talking in an interview about Spider-Man No Way Home, and he was saying how when he signed on for Spider-Man 2, he was signed in for like a 4-picture deal.
Whoa,
and then they killed him
weird.
after the end of the first one. And it's like, there's even back then with the superhero stuff, there is this idea that like it is always going to keep going. And just when you think like, oh, well, I'm killed off, I'm dead. No, you aren't. You can come back for any reason whatsoever we choose.
Does that mean when they brought him back, like, that was just the second picture in his 4-picture deal? Because I have to imagine there's like a expiration date on that. Like, it's been 15 years. You know, it's null and void.
Yeah. Probably, but regardless, he did say that he was signed on for 4 at least.
Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying nothing can plan for, like, superheroes, sure. Like, you know, when you start a new Batman movie, I expect that you're assuming, oh, we're going to do the adventures of Batman going forward. Like, people expect it. It's obviously what you're trying to start when you're starting it. But it's a shame that so many standalone movies, I think, also have to factor in, this is franchise potential. This is something that we can keep going if need be. Anyway, spoilers. You have been warned. Spoilers for Robocop 3. We're going to get into it. Like, I'm just going to say it. Whenever you kill a character off in the previous movies in Act 1 of your sequel, it's going to go down badly. I'm not saying there's no good examples of it, but I'm struggling to think of a good example of it.
Yeah, I think it can work if it is the through line of the movie. Like, if you make that the big deal and you make it so the characters reacting to that specifically, you can make it work. But it wasn't enough here.
Yeah, I think the problem is that it just feels like you're taking a character who we thought was important because they were important. I mean, admittedly less so in 2 because she was just kind of around in 2. But in Robocop 1, she was super important. And you take that character and you effectively fridge them. And, you know, I think it's a little bit... Like, I'll joke about it, sure, like anyone else will. I think it's a bit unfair to ever call... Like, every single time any, like, side character dies, referring to it as fridging, because I don't think it is always just fridging. I think sometimes it makes complete sense to do it. But I think when you do it with a character like this in a sequel and you do it early on in the sequel story, it feels like fridging. It feels like you took someone who was important and made them just someone that's there to die. And I think that always stings. So obviously we're talking about Officer Lewis here, Nancy Allen's character, who you know, it was so, as I was watching it this time, and I knew it was coming, and I'm like, they give her a pretty decent introduction. They do the whole thing where she's introduced even before Robocop is, and has a couple of moments, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of sad because I know she's not going to be around, and she like amongst everything else in this movie, I'm just happy to see Nancy Allen again because I like Nancy Allen,
Right.
and then like she's definitely going to be gone though in like 10 minutes, so that sucks.
I do wonder how much of that was like an original script thing compared to how long is she going to be available for filming, because it did, you know, obviously they didn't get Peter Weller back, so there is a little bit of disconnect between the two movies there.
It's hard to say. You never know. Like, if this was her saying she doesn't really want to come back, but she'll do a week of shooting, and they said, okay, fine, we'll kill you off early on, and that you know, that can motivate the character a bit. That's one thing versus, oh no, they just wanted to do this, and she's like, sure, whatever, I'm getting a payday. I don't care, I'll show up and die. You know, whatever, I'm not blaming her. I don't really know which way round it went. It's hard to say, honestly, in the final product. It could be either, but either way, it leaves you with a bit of distaste, because on the one hand, it's like, okay, I don't like I never hold it against an actor for not wanting to come back and then saying and begrudgingly saying, okay, I'll come back for a couple of days and just kill me quickly. But I never like that, because it feels like, okay, your heart wasn't in it, so it just gives this bit of a tone that I don't like. And alternatively, if it was always that way in the script because the writer said, no, this is a great idea, we're going to kill off this character early on, then I'm mad at the writer, because I feel like, no, you're just kind of like throwing away a character for a cheap attempt at, you know, making his care. So either way, it's not perfect. Either way, there's you know, maybe one's a lesser evil perhaps, but I'm not thrilled by either.
Yeah, no, again, I think that it really could work in this setting at the very least if it became the main focus of the movie. If the revenge for her being killed was the primary focus, or at the very least, it's a major character motivation.
I mean,
but
justice, David, not revenge. He's Robocop.
Yes, sorry, justice, absolutely. But it wasn't. Like, yes, the memories of her come up a few times. There's a few little, like, picture things, but for the most part, it still feels like he's driven by his prime directives of, you know, care for the public more than get revenge justice for her.
The only thing that I kind of like later on about her death is that when he shows up to the bad guy at the very end, everything else is going on, and he says he's under arrest, and he's like, what charge? And he says, the murder of Van Loos. The idea that that's what he's here to arrest him for, regardless of anything else, is a nice idea. It's like one little nugget of a nice idea, like wrapped in everything else that I don't like very much. I think the big problem is, though, with her character dying, is that the situation where it happens is so like sprung up out of almost nowhere, where it just kind of all of a sudden they're in this situation and they're making a stand. See if like she had been like talking for the first act of the movie that she's kind of siding with the protesters and the rebels because what OCP are doing are wrong, and Robocop just doesn't get it because he's Robocop and he's like, oh, I'm just upholding the law, this is my directives, you know, I don't necessarily consider like the human, like decide, you know, the human factor of deciding who's right and who's wrong in this situation. And then her death is what, like, you know, it's like it motivates him because he finally understands that she was willing to die for this belief of protecting the innocent, regardless of what the law said who the innocent were. Like, and that could be a motivator. Like, I think that might have made it mean something if she already cared about it. But literally, her making the choice to say, no, we're not moving anywhere, you'll have to go through us, is literally just brought up in the moment it's in. There's no, like, build up to her, like, sympathizing with anyone or anything like that, you know?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that again, the nuance is gone. It's this idea of these are the good guys, they do good things, and we don't have the moment. I mean, even when he's standing in front of the church between these innocent people and the rehab agents, he goes through his directives just to remind us what they are. And directives 1 and 2 are serve the public trust and protect the innocent. So, like, this was always going to be the way it played out. I don't think there is a version of this where he doesn't side with the protesters, because they are the public and they are innocent in this, and they're just being thrown out of their homes. And it's only until he hits the third one where he's like, okay, but also the legal aspect is there. But the first two override that one, no problem.
No, I'm just trying to give more meaning to her death from like her side, right? If she gave a crap before then, it would have felt like, oh, she's standing up for something that she's been repeatedly saying to him and the audience that she cares about, as opposed to just springing up in the moment out of nowhere. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I don't buy that he would ultimately make this choice regardless. I'm saying that it could mean more for the themes of the movie if she actively cared about it before 10 seconds before her death, you know?
I mean, I always took it more, just from the way I saw it, that it was more that she is ride or die with Murphy. It's like he is the one who fires the first shot there, and it's only once he's like, hey, this is wrong, you're not allowed to do this, that's when she comes out like, I'm with you, let's do this. And it's that idea that she died because of his decisions there that could have been explored a bit more.
Okay, I don't hate that, but that, again, it needs more. It needs more to really flesh that out.
I mean, that at the moment that she hops in the car, right before this scene, and another cop says, hey, do you want your body armor? I'm like, God, she's dead.
Oh, yeah, like that line annoyed me so much. You're telegraphing it to the audience.
Yeah.
No,
just to make sure you know she can get shot right now.
I don't need my body armor. I'm off duty. You're going with Robocop to a suspected rebel base.
Yep.
Anywho, so
top tier rating from whoever. I'm not going to put it on Frank Miller, but I want to.
Well, it's Frank Miller and Fred Dekker, co-writing, based on a story by Frank Miller. So, I mean, let's go back to the start though, because we sort of. I want to talk about Lewis's death because it's to me it's the biggest sticking point of this movie. It's just this big mark, like a third of the way in. It just sort of sours like my mood for the next chunk. But to go back to the start, because it takes a little bit of time before we even get to see Robocop, they do take their time introducing this new status quo that this, we see the news at the start, the Japanese companies taking over OCP, and we see Nico, who's the young girl in the film, she's watching the news program, and her parents
doing her calculus homework,
doing her on her fancy like laptop computer, which is like a little suitcase that opens up in the keyboard. This is like super advanced.
God, like, see, here's the thing. That laptop is bulky as hell by today's standards, but if you give me that keyboard that automatically folds in, I'm buying it. Like, I love it.
For sure. And it's got a handy handle to carry it around. So that's wild. Especially since later on, she seemingly hooks into the Wi-Fi of a robot, even though, like, the rest of the movie, she is, like, jacking in with wires to things to hack into stuff, but all of a sudden in the final fight she can wirelessly hack into the bad robot. Okay, whatever.
Nowhere in Detroit has Wi-Fi except for the OCP building. That's it.
Oh dear. But anyway, just as her dad's tucked her out of bed and saying, no, we're safe, there's nothing going to happen to us, even though they're clearly worried because they live in this neighborhood that's been affected. As soon as he's saying that, he's not even out of the room when the bulldozer comes in the wall.
The giant wrecking ball just smashes the window. It's like, okay, pack your stuff, let's go.
We have to run. Also, they have Robocop toys in this universe because she has like a Robocop figure.
That was in the last movie. They showed the little action figures in the last movie, and I was like, okay, so in universe, he's that big of a deal that he gets his own little stuff. But here's the thing: there's also an Ed 209, which means not only are they branding Robocop, the whole OCP line's got toys made for him.
They'll turn anything into merch.
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised there's not a Johnson action figure for the kids to enjoy in this universe.
I'm sure at some point the CEO floated around an idea of, like, can I be an action figure? Would kids buy that? Make them buy that. Get marketing up.
What if it's like, the employee of the month gets an action figure, so over time they just like keep adding employees to the action figure range.
That would be like the best action figure line to just like have set up in the office and be like, Johnson, why haven't you got me my report?
It would just be like, eventually it'd just be like 100 generic dudes in suits, and that's all they are.
No, the issue is that Johnson keeps on winning it year after year, or month after month after month, and they have to give them the like, different suits and attachments and such.
Oh, eventually just go to Barbie, but here's Hawaiian shirt Johnson, he's on vacation.
Yeah. Cyborg Johnson.
So... yeah, they're on the run. There's chaos outside as basically all the civilians are being carted into these buses led by what are they called again?
Rehab agents.
Rehab agents. They're the Nazis, okay? They're in the sort of grey suits and they're led by McTaggart, who's the villain. Oh, sorry, McDaggett. Sorry, I put an R in there.
That's fine.
McDaggett is the name of the bad guy, played by John Castle, who I can't say I know from anything else. He's just this guy.
I looked up his filmography and there was like a few things that I remember the movies of, but I don't remember him.
Okay. Well, basically she gets separated from her parents though, does Nico, when there's just like crowds like pushing each other out the way, and her parents get carted onto a bus to get taken away, and she's left on her own. This is also where we're introduced to CCH Pounder's character, Bertha, who's like a resistance fighter who is basically yelling to the crowd, telling them that this is injustice and like all the whatever else.
Yeah, she blows up the crane that's swinging the wrecking ball around and then steals a megaphone, just like, everyone fight for your homes, OCP is evil. And all I can think of is that news? Like, do the people of the when people hear OCP is evil, shouldn't the reaction be, yeah?
I think they were missing, because I think later on when it's also broadcast from Dr. Lazarus saying, hey, OCP are lying to you. I think we need more stuff earlier in the movie of like people in other parts of Delta City being like, oh, have you heard these stupid rumors about OCP? No, they're a lovely company. They just sold me my new Porsche or something.
Show the propaganda working. Show them being able to sell the public on them actually being a good.
Because we never get to see any parts of the city that aren't the part that's affected, so we don't see what all the other people in the city think of all this, which is maybe a missed opportunity from a storytelling perspective.
I mean, I wouldn't even say the other parts of the city. I think it would be more effective to show the people who are affected by it still being propagandized to believe that OCP is still working for them.
Yeah. That said, though, as we see at OCP headquarters over the next several scenes here or there, things aren't looking great there because they're in a time of transition. So there's just people jumping out of their offices and to their death.
That was the bit that like you hear a guy's wife on the phone being like, honey, are you still there? As you see him walk over to the window and jump out, as she just continues to be like, oh, this happens to companies all the time. And I'm like, God damn, that is dark, but I'm here for it. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell it's one of the darker jokes, or one of the only dark jokes in the movie, because it's one of the few that I actually thought was funny.
Yeah.
Particularly, it wasn't even the jumping out the window that I thought was funny. It was the fact that the car arriving outside, like, turns out to be the same time, because you see the body fall in the background. It's just, okay, that was the comic time, and that was the
everyone starts running to see the guy jumping, and then, like, what is Johnson and whoever is like, man, what a stupid way out. I'd shoot myself in the head, personally.
Yeah. Which is set up for something that actually happens quite quickly after that, to be honest. I was expecting that to come back later in the movie, not in a minute. But anyway, so they've established this. The girl goes on the run from one of these Nazi guys and ends up being saved by CCH Pounder's character. They grab her and take her into the van, which sounds quite dodgy when I say it that way, but you know what I mean.
It looks dodgy when she does it.
But they're hiding and they keep her safe, and she's just along for the ride now. And we follow this group of rebels going to what turns out to be a police armory, right?
Yes.
Where they're breaking in to try and get weapons, but they're shocked to discover it's being guarded by an Ed 209. So we get Ed 209s in this movie again, because we didn't really have any in the second movie.
Yeah, and the kid is just enthralled, like, oh my god, is that an Ed 209? And meanwhile it's like, you are trespassing, you've got 5 seconds.
Yeah, and she's like, don't worry, when I'm done it'll be as, helpless as a puppy. And bizarrely, that's the exact thing she typed out of the laptop to make it as helpless as a puppy.
So I'm just going to assume that this is a future where, like, ChatGPT is like, where you just have to, like, engineer prompts to get it to behave the way you want.
And then their stolen police, like, ID card doesn't open the thing. In fact, instead, it sends a message straight to, like, the police headquarters being like, oh no, someone's trying to break into the armory, send some cops. Luckily, the girl just uses Ed 209 to blow up the door, and they go in and get a bunch of stuff, including, now we don't know what it is at this point, but what turns out to be Robocop's jetpack is in there. So
I'm sorry, did you say $9.99 other action figure not included? Is that what I heard in the background?
The best part is they've got no reason to take it, and the justification to take it with the weapons they're grabbing is that CCH Pounder just says, it looks expensive, grab it. And I'm like, I thought you were doing this because you were freedom fighters, not because you were trying to make some money.
No. It looks expensive, so that means for them to replace it would cost them a fortune.
Oh, I see.
They're taking it because it seems important. Yes.
That's just economic warfare, you're saying?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll take your word for it. Oh, dear. So they go on the run from some cop cars that are chasing after them. Well, actually, first of all, the Ed 209 shoots up a bunch of cop cars, actually. That happens first.
The cops manage to cut them off. They don't have a way out. And then Ed 209 just shoots all the cop cars to give them the little bit of lead time.
Yes, and our plucky kid character sort of, I don't know, gives a little, like, nod or a high five or something, and they go on their way.
Yeah. I I recognize that this doesn't have a direct timeline, but this does feel like the same night, does it not? This feels like she was picked up in the van and then was immediately brought here. That is very quick to get your kid involved in your terroristic activities. Even if you're in the right, it's very quick.
Yeah. So the cops, we'll get introduced to a diner full of cops because a guy goes in to try and rob the diner and yells at Jeff from Curb Your Enthusiasm to put all the money in the bag. And then the guy, the thief, turns and just finds out that this is a cop diner and there's just nothing but a room full of cops pointing guns at him, which is slightly amusing. Fine.
I did like Jeff's one-liner where he looks at the thief and is like, so what's it like to be an actual rocket scientist?
Yes. But then it's like, okay, the call comes in, these guys are on the run, and they all basically start bickering over whose turn it is to actually take the call. And that's how we get introduced to Lewis, who's up the back behind the newspaper, and it comes down, she blows the bubble gum as she's known to be doing. It's like, okay, this is a nice introduction,
Makes her feel like a badass.
Yeah. And she's not, by the way, she's not wearing body armor in this scene either. Everyone else has got this body armor on that we've seen in the previous movies, and she's just walking around in her overalls that she wears. Yeah. But yeah, so they have this chase, right? And basically, it turns out that the guy driving the van for the rebels, right? Marino is his character's name. He's like, "Hey kid, you're good with computers, but check out what I've got." And he's got a TV remote that affects the traffic lights. Yes. And it causes a jam up, and of course the cop cars crash into some other cars. This is where my main man from Frankenhooker appears in the movie, because he's this New Jersey guy who just comes out and goes, "Oh, you dumb broad cop! Who lets you drive? You're a woman."
It's not even her car that crashes into the guy. It's the other cop car, but he just immediately comes at the one female one, just being like, "You stupid broad."
Yeah, it's Shane Black's car that drives into him. So yeah. Okay. But this is where it's a weird turn in the movie, though. So Robocop gets a cool introduction as well, because they think they've gotten away from the cops, like the rebels do, and then this one cop car just pulls out behind them, and there's a little sting in the music to be like, "Oh, this is someone important." And of course, quite quickly, the kid's like, "Do you think it's him?" She's excited that she's been chased by Robocop.
It felt like a Batman intro. It felt like this is the Batmobile pulling up.
And that's what it felt like. But the weird turn, that was fine. I have no problem with that little introduction for Robocop. That's cool, right? The weird turn here, though, that feels very different, this is something they've just pulled out their ass for this movie, is that Lewis and the other cops, they're just kind of dealing with this asshole who's yelling sexist stuff, and then they spot a bit of graffiti on one of the signs, and they go, "Oh no, we're in that gang's territory."
I think it's the Splatterpunks.
The Splatterpunks, and I'm like, wait, what? What's happening? And they immediately call him for backup, and then we get this weird little horror movie scene where there's punks coming out from the alleyways, and they're very intimidating, and there's no. I'm like, are they insinuating that these three cops are about to get gang raped from this group of
pretty much
thugs? What's happening here?
They're in the wrong territory. They recognize the gang signs on the telephone poles, and then immediately everything starts going wrong for them because these guys got insane amount of weaponry and the ability to surround these cops very quickly.
I just, crime is really bad in this city if there's territory that the cops are actively scared to be left alone in. I don't know.
Yes.
Obviously the prime reason for this, there's two reasons. One is that this is actually going to be the bad guy's army at the end, so I set that up for that. The other reason though is that because Lewis is in trouble, Robocop hears her distress call and just stops pursuing the rebels and says, "No, screw that, I'm going to go help my best friend." So he goes and does that, which all the other cops are like, "Wait, why is he disobeying orders? What's going on here?" But yeah,
none of the other cops really care that much that he showed up. It's just the sergeant who's like, that was a direct order, and then it's the OCP guys who are like, "Hey, he's a robot, shouldn't he be predictable and follow orders?" To which then we get introduced to Dr. Lazarus, who's like, "Nah, it's a human underneath it. Why would you think that he wouldn't be acting like a human?"
Yeah. Also, there's a fascination in this movie, and I get that he technically did this in the first movie, right? But when he did this in the first movie, it was a solid brick wall, and he was shooting around it to walk through it so that he could get the bad guy, right? So that was a big moment in the first movie. He shoots a circle of bullets on a wall so he could punch through it because it's so strong that he wouldn't be able to just punch through it. Robocop does that multiple times in this movie. The first time is here when he arrives, right? The cop car comes flying off the overpass, right? He goes up a car park that's like multiple stories, and he drives off of it and has this big entrance into the scene to help Lewis and the other cops. And he shoots a hole with his new machine gun attachment that he's got in his arm. Again, kids, you can buy that toy separate from the other models.
Yes.
Right? He shoots a hole in the cop car and then bursts through it and shoots from there. And part of me was like, that was a bit excessive. Like, I feel like it'd have been just as quick to go out the door of the car. Right? The one that's more egregious, though, is later on. Because later on, he shoots a hole, right? And then bursts through it. Do you know what he shoots a hole in, David, to come through?
Oh, God, I feel like it's some sort of entryway of some sort.
It's a door! Just open the effing door. I'm trying not to swear because it's really stupid.
I thought it was a funny enough moment, but yeah, it's here's the thing. Murphy, even in the first movie, has always had a flair for the dramatic. The whole thing with the gun swirl, like, he wants to be the cowboy hero. So I accept the fact that he's just going to do things that are stupidly flashy and don't make sense just for the sake of being theatrical.
Okay. All right. I'll let it go. But this one felt a little bit of a cliche, or like a shameless throwback to that one moment in the first film.
Oh, yeah.
Later on with the door, though, I was like, are you kidding me? It's a door.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it was locked, maybe.
Oh, Robocop can't kick down the locked door?
I know. I love how, like, 15 seconds before he shoots around the door is he pushes open a solid steel, like, elevator door in half because it was going to jam. But yeah, then he's unable to open the later door.
Yes, the regular wooden door that is, barely enforced within. All right, so yeah, big saves Lewis. She's thankful. That's it. He gets chewed out back at the precinct for going off script.
There's this weird little side bit where two of the splatter punks get away.
Oh, I forgot about this. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, they set him on fire and then try like shooting him a few extra times, but then ultimately they get taken out. And I kept thinking like, oh, are these two going to be recurring? No. They're just here.
It's just to have more of an action scene with Robocop when he first shows up, because he chases them off separately. And they pour, booze or something all over him and set him on fire. And then they ran into like a derelict store that's been abandoned. But I noticed that on like one of the things that was left on the shelves of this store was a sai, as in like a Raphael sword from Turtles. And I thought, what was this store that was selling a sai?
I don't think it was selling them. I think that this is where they are. It's a completely abandoned store, and this is where they're just setting up their base.
Okay, you think people are just storing their weapons here?
Yeah, their weapons. Okay. This is the Splatterpunks like headquarters, one of them.
All right, that makes more sense, but it caught me off guard. Anyway, the sprinklers go off because Robocop's on fire, completely negating the flames that they put on him. Also, one of them keeps saying, shoot him in the mouth, shoot him in the mouth. He's not got any armor there. And the other guy is just so shit that he just can't do it.
I don't think he ever even gets his gun working. Like, he's just sitting there trying to fumble with it the whole time.
Performance issues. Happens to the best of us. So yeah, he gets shoot out. So what's so funny is that the last movie, and even in the first movie to an extent, I think we even brought up the idea that it felt like they might have been setting up one of the scientists to be the sympathetic character for Robocop. Especially in the second movie, it felt like they were kind of like almost going to do it. Like they kind of had someone there that was potentially going to be that role and didn't happen. They finally did it in this one, where they actually made the scientist lady, Dr. Lazarus, one of the main characters. And she's introduced here along with Bradley. I mean, we say Bradley Whitford at OCP first, but he shows up and he's there to yell at them and say, hey, stop him from feeling things and thinking.
Yeah. What do you mean he's half human? Get rid of that. We just want the cold cybernetic whatevers.
Yeah, sweet cheeks.
This man came up with 1,000 different ways to say you've got a nice ass, and he listed them all off in this scene.
Yes, apparently there wasn't enough sexism with my man from Frankenhooker being you dumb broad and all that to Lewis. We had to have this guy be just completely like pedantic and condescending because the attractive woman happens to be the scientist in the movie. Which I will say this. So later on, I'm skipping ahead to this now because I thought of it because I said attractive there. later on, there's a weird moment where Robocop's kind of coming back online after he's had like some surgery and whatnot because he got injured. Where he has like a vision of his wife, right, in the first movie, and she like morphs into Lewis, and then Lewis morphs into Dr. Lazarus, and I think what they were going for with that moment is that he's always had like a woman who tethers him to like humanity, right? When he was alive and he was normal, it was his wife. Then it became Lewis when he was a cop, and now it's Dr. Lazarus. But it didn't come across that way to me. It felt like you're making it almost like here's all the babes of Robocop like flashing through his eyes because that's what keeps him going. Is like, and it's I don't think they were meant to be, but because you just see them from the neck up, it made them look all naked. I don't think they were actually meant to be naked, but it made them look naked.
No. It was definitely just a poor structuring thing. Honest to God, I thought I knew what that scene was going into it, where it's just like, oh, okay, we are going to actually explore that getting justice for Lewis plot. Like, that's something that's going to happen. But then they had the face turn into Lazarus, and I was like, all right, you lost me. I don't understand what we're going for here anymore, because, like, she's just a friendly scientist lady. Like, there hasn't been a romance plot there. What are we going for? And I still have no idea outside of here's the babes.
Yeah, there's nothing after it where they do anything with it to say that he does have some kind of like weird like. And it's not even like, I wouldn't even necessarily be mad if they said, oh, in some level he like had bonded so much with Lewis that there was like, it's like, oh, if I was still a normal human man, maybe I would want to pursue something romantic there, but obviously I can, and I'm not, and maybe that's something you could have Robocop, wrestle with in some way. I'm not saying I wanted that, but I could at least see the argument for pursuing, like, how does he feel about people around him? But it just, it felt like such a weird moment because it was like morphing from his wife to her to then Dr. Lazarus, and it was going from the woman that he actually was married to, who was the love of his life and had obviously all the baggage of him remembering his human life was a big thing in the first two movies, to have her transition into Lewis and then to Dr. Lazarus. It did just kind of, it felt like the movie just said, yeah, we killed off Lewis and now Lazarus has replaced her. Like, that's literally what we did in the movie, so this is how he's seen her too. That felt weird to me.
Yeah. The only other thing that it does during that sequence is it shows a video clip of Lewis from the first movie recognizing Robocop as Murphy. And then it shows a clip of his wife saying, oh, Murphy, I thought you'd never be back home or whatever. So maybe it's doing this thing of like, these are the people who ground him to being Murphy to some extent, but
sure,
it's not explored. Nothing in this is brought back up in any way that makes it feel like it justifies its existence besides, hey, we got a cool special effect of face morphing we want to do.
I think because it morphed between them physically, it made it feel very sexual in a weird way. Whereas if it had just like cut between different moments where they all sort of called him Murphy or because the scientist lady literally, like she disobeys an order in this movie because she's told to put this chip in that'll like disconnect his human emotions and memories or whatever, and she chooses not to do it. We see her take a hammer out and smash it, and that's like a character choice she makes. So if they did a thing where they actually like showed just little moments where, like you say, Lewis recognizes him as Murphy and keeps calling him that, his wife says whatever, Lazarus like sticks up for him and says no, he's a human, he should keep these qualities, whatever, right? Because I didn't hate the little moment like after this where he gets in the car with Lewis and Lewis calls him Robo and he's like, call me Murphy, like, and she smiles. That on its own is a nice little moment of like, hey, that's confirming to the audience and to her that he's still him, that he's not had his brains taken away.
Yeah. I will say that kind of felt like an aborted arc to me. Like, it felt like that was going to be something that was going to be explored in this movie, and then it just immediately, they're like, nah, we're not going to do that, and then we just never go back to it at all.
Oh, yeah, I get what you're saying. We could have went a whole act not being sure if that had been taken away from him, and maybe he was even, like, pretending because he knew it would give him an advantage or something. Like, there's so much they could have done with that. But
honestly, what it needed to be was right up. All they had to do was extend it by like 30 seconds, where we don't know whether or not he's changed until we get to the church. And he's aiming his gun at all these innocent people who are technically breaking the law by being there. And that's where we're questioning, oh God, is he about to do this? And then we realize, oh wait, no, she never actually put the chip in. But for some reason, they moved it 30 seconds earlier to when they're just in the car about to drive there, and it completely defeated the point.
Yeah. And maybe have him saying, I'm Murphy, like, as she's dying, as opposed to just random moment in car. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Again, I still wouldn't necessarily love the fact that she dies so quick. Like, there's so much she could do. Like, I don't know. It just feels like a bit of a waste, in all honesty. But yeah, anyway, so he when they were driving back from the previous scenes, he saw the girl run into the church. So when they're showing all these like suspected hideout locations, he recognizes the church, so he goes there with Lewis, and that's where this big showdown takes place, where the rehab. I can never remember the goddamn name. The rehab officers with McDaggett shows up and like demands they all come outside, and Lewis goes outside and says, "Hey, there's just people like living in here for heat. They're homeless."
Yeah, and he doesn't care at all, and he's like, "Oh, we just want them inside. They're on our property, whatever." And she's like, "Oh, well, you'll have to shoot through us." And he's like, "Okay."
Yeah, and then
you act like that's a problem.
Yeah, he just does it. And then they fire a bunch of shit at Robocop, including a grenade, which is what really puts them down.
Yep.
And the girl convinces the rebels to take Robocop with them. So Robocop carries in Lewis, but collapses afterwards. She has her dying words, and
which are recorded and played back several times, which is basically like, "Go get them! Don't let them get away with this."
Yeah. I feel like her dying words being like, "Make sure you get them," it just felt a little bit weird to me. Like, if anything, it would have thematically, just not even just for this movie, but for the whole trilogy, would have made more sense for her to say, "Remember you're Murphy," or something like that, or something to that effect of like, "Don't forget that you're Murphy," or whatever.
Yeah, just something that like really drives home the humanity aspect. I do like the opening of that conversation where she says, "I'm scared," and he says, "Don't worry, it'll it doesn't hurt for long." Like he's basically saying like, "Yeah, I died too. Like I've been through it. Trust me, I'm able to help you through this right now." I like that moment.
Actually, that was kind of wild, as later on he has like a little flashback to being killed, and we see like a couple of clips of the bad guys from the first movie, and I'm like, "Movie, don't remind me of the first." You're just like pointing out how jarringly different this one is.
Yeah. I will. At least they didn't actually show the original Robocop compared to new Robocop here.
Yeah, it's just the bad guys, but yeah, it just stuck out to me. I'm like, oh, geez. Because he ends up collapsing as they're walking in the tunnels. And actually, this is one of the things that I felt weird to me, is that they go into their hideout, which is like, or one of their hideouts anyway, in the sewer system. And Robocop's like, "Oh, there's a tracker on me." And of course the girl knows where all these bits are, so she just opens up a slot and is like, "Hey, this beeping thing." And the guy just runs to the entrance of where they are and just throws it down the sewer. Now, I get that he's booby-trapped the manhole above where he's thrown it. And obviously when the OCP come to open it up, when the rehab guys come and they open the thing, it blows up in their face. But I'm like, you're 20 feet away from that. They're still like...
Yeah, if anything, exploding there would be, well, clearly we're on the right path. Let's keep going down that way.
And they don't stay here for very long. They do move on to their main hideout later, but it felt like they weren't like, "Go! Like, you're only 20 feet away from where that tracker is. Like, if anything, you should be like putting this tracker into like on the back of a dog or something and saying, 'Go!'" They
literally showed when they went down into the sewer a bunch of rats. They should have attached it to the rat.
Or, put it on a bike going down a hill or something and just send it off into the sunset. I don't know. Like, no.
So this is also somewhere around here we get introduced more so to the one guy named Kuntz, who he doesn't have the nerve for this. He's upset the Robocop's involved and he doesn't think it's going to work.
Yeah, that's a Stephen Root's character for anyone want to put a face to the name.
Yep. And everyone's telling him like, "Hey, you got to stop freaking out. You got to calm down, man." But Kuntz, he doesn't have it in him.
No, hopefully he doesn't betray them later.
Oh, I'm sure that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
He seems like a very trustworthy guy. He's going to burn down the building later.
Yeah, and also throughout all this first chunk, we've had a bit more here or there with the OCP guys and McDaggett and the Japanese like CEO calling in OCP and like demanding better results and whatnot and saying, "Hey, we're going to send our own guy in to deal with this." So we get our katana wielding scary Japanese dude, who of course is going to turn out to be a robot later on. but he comes in to
I mean,
start.
you say turns out to be. During his intro scene, his eyes open up and it does the noise when it happens.
That's true. It's the sort of thing though where if you just miss that one little effect though, you wouldn't have known until
right.
His face gets like hit and his jaw goes out of line and he has to sort of like put it back into place, which is an okay effect to be honest for what it is, but it's.
Oh yeah, I think it honestly his robotic stuff seems very impressive for the time. I'm still not sure how they managed to like, unless they just fully scaled his head and like built his head from wax or whatever. But even then, it looked realistic. It looked good.
Yeah, so the thing with this like sort of section of the movie though, his like subplot, is that he comes in and he gets a bit of information. He comes into clearly this base that was in the sewers, right? Once everyone's left, but there's a few guys waiting and like, sorry, buddy, everyone's already cleared out. Guess like, we're going to kill you now, blah, blah, blah. And of course, this is what reveals, oh no, he's a great fighter. He can do a big jump and spin flips in the air and he kills these three guys and he's clearly inhuman. You see the jaw going out of line and all that. And he finds like a transparent like bit of plastic with a red line on it. And it's clearly meant to be put on top of a map to show the route to some, location, right? Probably their hideout, right? And he picks it up and we get a subplot that plays out between a bunch of other scenes where he goes to like a little store and gets like, the town map. And part of him is like, you're lucky this is the exact size of map that they were using with this like overlay because, maps come in different sizes.
I don't know. There's only one size map of Detroit. No one's ever made a differently sized map.
Maybe. But the thing that gets me, though, about his subplot here, though, is that they go out of their way to show him putting the breadcrumbs, right? Like, going through the breadcrumbs and finding out where the hidden base is. And yet, by the time he actually shows up at the base...
Yeah.
They've already, like, been here. Like, the OCP guys and the rehab guys have already shown up. They've already found out via other means, like the traitor has told them already where the base is.
What? There's a traitor.
They've already cleared it out. They've already had the big action scene. So by the time that he's there, he's just there for Robocop coming back and like sort of finding out that stuff's happened as well. Which, I mean, here's the thing. Technically, in a scene around there's a conversation between McDaggett and the Japanese guy, the CEO, where he says, "Hey, your man here is meant to be taking care of the robot." And if that's his main purpose, then it kind of makes sense that he's waiting for Robocop to show back up. But I feel like when he first sends him there at the start of the movie, it's just broadly to go and like get results. It's not specifically about Robocop. That at some point that changed.
Yeah, the original conversation where he gets brought into things is basically preempted by the Americans are being chewed out by the Japanese business owner. He's saying like, you guys aren't getting results, you're not doing whatever. And then he goes into the robot's room and says like, I'm going to be sending our own agent. And it's implied that it is to get this to go along smoother, because I don't think we ever even said the reason that they're closing out all this stuff is because construction has to begin on their whatever big project by a certain time, or else their loans are going to be called back and then they're bankrupt.
Yeah, there's a deadline to get all this started. So there's a bit of pressure.
I agree that there was this aspect where it seems like he's going in for results, but then pretty much the next scene that you see the guy talking to the head of the Nazis, the Nazi guy is the one who's saying like, oh, you sent him in to deal with the robot. I'm the one who's doing the actual work here.
Yeah, okay, so, but even at best then, right, let's say he's just trying to find the hideout because he wants to, like, deal with Robocop.
Mm-hmm.
At best, it makes all those scenes of him following the breadcrumbs just meaningless because, like, if he just finds out because McDaggett's found out where it is, because he found out from the traitor character, then all of these scenes of him, like, getting the map, finding the tracing overlay and all that, all of it is just kind of a waste of time because there was another way he found out later anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The fact that it happens after the rest of the raid happens and, like, that entire area has been bombed out, it completely defeats the entire purpose of the beginning, except to show from a audience standpoint that this guy is hyper competent, a good fighter, and is able to take Robocop one-on-one. But like the plot itself, completely useless.
Yeah, it's bad writing. It's an element of bad writing to make it feel like, okay, it serves a purpose in that it's showing off who this guy is, but everything he actually does in these scenes is meaningless, and that's a problem.
Honestly, it would have been fine if, again, it took place ever so slightly earlier in the plot. if they had set that moment right before the raid happened and like set it to, I don't know, some other building even that like is also used by the rebels but is not their main base or something, and like anything that would have made it so that this happened before the rest of the rehab people figured out where they were.
And honestly, even if it was happening at the same time, so Robocop's fighting this guy over in like this other separate building that's near their base, but not actually in their base, it would actually make it feel like Robocop was more involved. Because one of the things that stuck out at me about that portion of the movie is that Robocop, after he's fixed, because so just to sum up some of the middle bit here, basically Robocop says, "Hey, the only person that can fix me is Dr. Lazarus, and I trust her. Go get her." So the kid goes to the police building, goes into her lab, and says, "Hey, I know Robocop." Proves it by saying a couple things, and then lo and behold, she comes back with a van with equipment to come and fix Robocop. So she's kind of joined the rebels at this point. And when he's fixed up, he has his weird vision where he thinks of all the sexy ladies that he knows like all morphing together. He gets up and he's like, "Oh, I promised Lewis that I would get these bad guys. I'm going to go and get her killer." So we get like almost like a self-contained like segment of the movie where Robocop goes hunting McDaggett on his own.
Yes.
And he goes into the police station, and at this point they've been putting out propaganda saying, "Hey, Robocop killed Lewis, and like he's like a traitor, he's a rebel now." And he walks out of the station, and the sergeant's like, "Hey, Murphy, do you know there's a warrant out for your arrest?" He's like, "I was aware of that, yes." He's like, "Oh, good, I'm just making sure you know." And that's it. He's like, "I'm not going to arrest you, obviously."
He's like, "Yeah, just making sure you know. What do you need? Rehab agents down the hall to the left. Have fun."
So Robocop just goes and like starts flamethrowing the rehab office, and then interrogates one of the guys. Like, "Hey, where's McDaggett? Where is that asshole?" Turns out he's at a sleazy motel where a bunch of his men are also with prostitutes because because he get tipped off by the traitor that Robocop was coming for him.
Yep. We also just tiny little things in between here. We get little sequence at OCP where I'm blanking on his name now, but the one guy that we were not Johnson, the other guy.
Oh, Bradley Whitford's character?
Bradley Whitford, that's it. I think it's like Fleck or something like that.
Yeah.
He ends up getting fired because he's not getting results because Robocop is still going off script. And so he follows through on that earlier comment where he said like, "Oh man, I just put a bullet in my brain." As soon as he's fired, he turns around, pulls a gun out of his coat pocket, and walks out of the room. And you think that's it. But then as Johnson and the CEO are having a conversation, you hear a gunshot outside the room, and he's like, "All right, well, excuse me, I'm going to leave now." So that was a good moment. And then they follow up on the kid's bit being separated from her parents because she's talking to Robocop, and it's like, "Oh yeah, once this is all done, I'm going to get reunited with my parents." And then Robocop looks through the I don't know what you call them, like the suspect reel, like the headshots or something.
He's not looking through it when she says that. He's basically looking back at his memory because he was looking through it earlier when he was looking at all the suspects, and he remembers back and he saw both of her parents in that list, and they both said dead. They both said they were killed on whatever
they were trying to escape the camps or whatever, the rehab camps,
which makes it sound like these rehab guys are just taking people out into a field and shooting them and claiming they're going to camps.
Probably.
That's what it sounds like.
Look, either they're taking them out and shooting them, and so they're Nazis, or they're sending them to camps, so they're Nazis.
Yes,
so regardless, they're Nazis. But yeah, no. So those two things happened in the in-between there. But yeah, then you get the, like you said, the bit where he goes to the hotel and finds McDaggett. We get a whole sequence there where Kuntz ends up being the traitor. And then we get the pimp mobile chase. I don't know if you want to spend any time on that.
I mean, it's just, like the Robocop goes up, says, "I need to commandeer your vehicle." The guy pulls out a knife until he sees it's Robocop and then says, "Yes, whatever you need, officer." And basically, it's just it's a chase sequence where McDaggett's jumped into one of his own vans and says, "Hey, drive." And he's firing a variety of big weapons, including a grenade launcher, at the car. But eventually the car Robocop's in is like missing its entire body. It's just the
wheels in a frame.
Yeah, it's the engine, the frame, and a seat, and that's basically all it is. And he basically gets away from Robocop because he throws out money to a bunch of kids who are playing hockey, including a neighborhood that has been unaffected by everything that's going on, because it's just like a regular suburban neighborhood. And these kids all start trying to grab all the money, and Robocop can't drive through them because he's not a piece of shit. So he's like, "Damn it, the bad guy got away." So, and then that's basically it.
Yeah, but then that's the part where Kuntz comes back to the rebel headquarters, and they're all like, "Hey, Coons, what have you been up to?" And he pulls out a gun, tells them they're all just going to sit here until the rehab officers show up.
So he ends up dying during this, like, tussle, right? So does CCH Pounder's character. She dies as well, and she tells them to run.
Yes. Because they all just immediately swarm. Like they're given maybe like 30 seconds of reprieve before they all bust in.
So he dies during this scene. Does Stephen Root's character? Why did he come here before the raid? Why did he even put himself in this position?
Because Pete. So the girl gets away.
The girl runs away through a vent or something, Doctor Lady gets trapped. While she was there, like, talking to everyone, though, she pointed out what the jetpack was. She's like, whoa, that's Robocop's flight pack.
Yeah.
And she's like, I designed it. It's super high tech, but the funding ran out before we could test it. So it's finished, though, is what you're saying. It's
how convenient.
It's operational, yes. So Robocop, like, during all this, and then some of the bits that come after, Robocop does feel like he's off camera. Like, from the moment where he loses the chase to go after McDaggett, it feels like he's away for a while. So when he comes sauntering into the base in the aftermath of everything that's happened, and there's no one there, and there's just, like, fire and stuff, I was like, damn, where have you been, Robo? You've missed everything. What's going on?
Yeah.
It just feels like he was gone for a long time. And then, of course...
Well, I would say even then, it feels worse than that, because he comes sauntering into the base and he has to fight against the other Japanese cyborg.
Yeah, samurai cyborg, yeah.
Samurai cyborg, yeah. And, he gets knocked down from that fight. He gets pretty knocked up. So while the rest of the stuff is continuing out, as we enter the third act, out in the rest of the neighborhood, he's still just stuck in this place. It feels like he's missing for that entire huge stretch of time there.
Yeah, he's really kept away from everything else, and it all just boils up to when he hears the broadcast from Dr. Lazarus, because basically the kid, like, sneaks into the vents of the OCP building where she's been held captive and is able to hack into the news network with her laptop from there and broadcast Dr. Lazarus, putting out a warning to the entire city that OCP are taking people out of their houses and killing them.
Who would have thought? Just one little bit in there that I think is a very important scene, because I absolutely love this moment. It is the moment where the OCP guys come into the police department and say, hey, load up all your men, give them all body armor, we're taking back that entire area of houses. And the sergeant basically says, no, I'm not going to do that. They threaten him with firing and, like, losing his pension, and he just takes off his badge, drops in the floor, and says, like, I got to go back. I still have to face my family after this, so no, I'm not doing that. And then one by one, if straight out of a completely different type of movie of, like, the feel-good moment of the year, is all the cops taking off their badges and quitting the force in solidarity with their sergeant.
Yeah, I mean, I like it in theory, I guess. I do think it feels a little bit like saccharine for a Robocop movie.
I mean, okay, if you're looking at it in that lens of a Robocop movie, yes, it absolutely is way too feel-good, but looking at it over the course of the trilogy of, like, you have these cops who hate the fact they were bought by OCP.
Sure.
They've been on strike repeatedly, and now they're asked to do something that is just blatantly illegal and, like, morally wrong.
I think this comes back to what I was saying earlier about, I can see the overall idea of this working, that the cops, like, eventually the sergeant says, no, we're fighting against OCP, and that his men and women are behind him, and making that a big deal. I think it's the execution of, like, this overly sentimental moment out of it, and immediately McTaggart sees, like, a punk who was just arrested, who was trying to, like, sneak out, and goes, hey, do you and your people want to make some money? So he's basically just going to recruit all the gangs to be the extra men for the OCP.
I as much as the scene was stupid, I did enjoy the moment where it's, like, panning over and showing all the punks getting loaded up with their gear, and you just see one punk in the background trying to put a helmet over this massive mohawk, and he's just like, I can't make it fit.
Yeah. So that's happening, right? So they're going to just force the rest of the neighborhood out of their houses. And not only that, but the sergeant and that haven't went home. They actually, like, ride their cop cars into the street where the survivors of the rebels are there. Like, the two guys that are left was Marino and the other one, the hat. The one with the hat.
I can't remember.
Right? And the cops pull up. Sergeant comes out and says, hey, in 30 minutes, OCP and the Nazis are all coming to take everyone from their homes. Get all the kids, anyone who can't fight, take them to safety, get them to hide somewhere. The rest of you're all deputized, and the music soars, and like they're all like, yeah, we're going to all stand together and take on the Nazis.
Yep.
Okay, fine. So they basically set up like a barricade. They get or not even just cop cars, just cars in the street. They flip them over. They make cover. They're going to make a final stand in the street as Robocop's fighting samurai cyborg and getting his ass kicked. And it's very convenient that when the cyborg like cuts off his arm, it's exactly at the bit that stuff connects to it, so you can just connect the other thing later.
I was fully expecting him to have to like dig in and pull out like the little clip that would have been cut off that was still lodged in there, just like, son of a bitch, just gotta there you go.
No, it just goes in easy peasy.
Because that's how easy it is to switch them on your new action figures, kids.
Yeah, he basically gets to his machine gun attachment. And I say machine gun because that's the main part of it, but it does have like a grenade launcher on it and like other bits.
Yeah, his little text on his heads-up display says smart bomb, and he fires that off into the samurai cyborg's head. It's
actually, it's funny I compared it to Beverly Hills Cop 3 earlier, because that movie also weirdly has this stupid gun that has lots of different types of things on it.
Okay.
Including the microwave, which one day when we do Beverly Hills Cop franchise, you'll get to discover that beauty.
Does it heat them up or give them cancer?
No, it's not a part of the it's not like a weaponized part of the gun. It's just convenience. You can put something in it to.
You can put a hot pocket in there.
Yes,
got it.
So you can make your hot pocket whilst you're blasting the bad guys.
Sure. Why not?
So it's just funny that Robocop's attachment here also has, various weapons on it that it can switch between. But anyway, he gets to that while he's getting the shit kicked out of him and like blasts the thing, and it blows the cyborg's head off, so you get sparks coming out of it, and that's kind of it. But he hears this broadcast. Dr. Lazarus at this point is broadcasting to the city saying, hey, OCP are lying. Fight back any way you can. And he's crawling as the theme's playing, and then he looks over and sees the flight pack. So we basically get the Avengers Portals moment where the cops and the rebels are fighting against the gangs in OCP, and it's pretty even until OCP bring in a tank, and they're like, shit, we can't do anything against the tank.
And then you hear, on your left.
You actually hear, on your left. And you just see the Robocop with the glorious optical effect where they've composited him onto the background, flying into the scene, and he fires his missile at the tank.
Here's the thing. Perspective-wise, they nailed it. Keying-wise, no.
This is the problem, is this moment is so ridiculously into the feel-good superhero camp. And this is a time where the superhero movie hadn't really... obviously, Batman and Superman existed, but this is such a superhero, like, the big hero comes to save the day moment, that it feels just so like on the nose for what it is. Like, I'm okay with them touching upon Robocop being the turning the tide that inspires everyone, but it's such a like moment. I don't know. Like,
right. No, I get you. It's 100% just the absolute big hero moment, and with everything else we've had in Robocop up to this point, it's always been this gritty, down to earth gunfighting moment. This is the first time that it feels absolutely too much larger than life, that the movie has not given you enough to work with to get to that point.
Amusingly, a moment that's very similar but done, I think, more fitting for the movie is in Dark Knight Rises. There's a moment where the cop army's facing down the bad guys, and Batman comes in the bat, right? It's very similar.
And once again, I always bring this up with that. This movie showed that the cops are going to be working against the public good. Dark Knight Rises decided to flip that script for whatever reason, despite the rest of the movie being like a pro Occupy Wall Street movement. I still never will be able to understand why they decided to make that choice.
It makes sense in the movie.
To an extent, but like, you look at the larger themes, they spend the first 45 minutes saying like, you rich people are all the problem, and then at the end it's like, yeah, but the poor people are evil, so shoot them.
But that's not the poor people though.
It's not, but like, it's to an extent, it's the people who have been subjugated more or less by the higher ups in Gotham and have been put down in the larger sense of things.
It's Bane's goons and a bunch of criminals that they've recruited.
Right, but a lot of those criminals were put... Okay, I'm not doing this discussion.
I feel like you're focusing on the wrong parts of that, but whatever. The point is
it's just something that always struck me as weird is that they do this whole anti-capitalist speech and then immediately put the cops as the good guys.
Yeah, I guess, but this is in a Dark Knight trilogy where Batman's already cleaned up the police force.
That's true. Fair enough.
Right, because that was a big part of how corrupt the police were in the first one.
Right. Anyway. So yes, this moment is absolutely way too saccharine. It's absolutely way too I will say I at least found it a little bit funny, the fact that he flew in apparently so hard that it just shattered all the windows as he's coming in, like every piece of glass shatters. But then he just decides to land right next to, I'm pretty sure, like all the sergeant and I think even the kid is around at this point as well. No, the kid's going up to OCP.
Yeah, because the kid's in the OCP building, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
All that stuff. Yeah, because... Actually, do you know what it all actually makes me think of more visually, in terms of just the actual character flying around? It's a very Turbo Man from Jingle All the Way.
Oh, yeah. I see that exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so... Yeah, Robocop saves them. They all cheer and go, "Hurrah! Robocop saved us!" And then he flies to the OCP building where McDaggett is and the CEO are, and he's like, "Hey, you're under arrest for the murder of Van Lewis." Blah blah blah. And he's like, "Oh, I don't think so." And then in walks another cyborg samurai. And then after he fights him and messes up his face a little bit, because he gets his face all kind of like, I don't know, misshapen,
askew. Yeah.
A second one walks in, so we get Robocop versus two cyborg samurai, and that's a whole thing.
You know what I think is most disappointing in these cyborg samurai fights is that it isn't a fight.
No.
At no point here is there any sort of fight. It's just Robocop gets knocked on his ass and then something happens where the cyborg samurai loses.
I think the problem is that you're trying to put Robocop in a fight. You've made a villain for Robocop. So, because on theory, okay, this is their version of the Terminator. The idea is the Japanese is ahead in technology. That's been kind of like just a joke basically since the 80s, that they make most better TVs, they make whatever. The idea being, theirs is more advanced. They've got an actual full-on cyborg that's a lot more akin to a Terminator, and that it looks human. Cool.
So it's also able to do like fancy acrobatics and can move quickly, whereas RoboCop is limited to like slowly turning one piece of his
That's
body.
what I'm getting at, is you've given him a villain that is primarily focused on melee combat. And Robocop turns slowly. He is, he's rigid. He's like a tank, in fact. He's a walking tank. And you've given, I think taking like a more human cyborg, like a Terminator, as a villain is not necessarily a bad idea, but it has to still be a villain that performs like a robot in terms of like its movement and how it shoots. It has to still act that way. But this thing's doing flips. It's doing all this stuff, but Robocop's he can't fight against it. So we can't even get a proper fight, like you say. There's just nothing to actually enjoy in the fight.
I think that theoretically, if you just want to save him as like the third act villain, you could make it work if it were built around the idea of, I have to outthink him, or the power of my friends are going to be able to save me, or something like that, just to make it more worth it. But because you used him the first time as an end of second act sort of little mini boss, and then bring back just two of him as an end boss, it makes it feel like he never was going to stand a chance to begin with, or he was always going to be able to stand a chance because he brought a gun to a sword fight.
Which, and ultimately they win because at this point, Dr. Lazarus has broken out of her room. She basically, after the broadcast, some guard came to get her, and she hit him, grabbed his machine gun, and for some reason, this is one of those weird little moments where I just stuck in my memory. It's her firing the shot of the machine gun muzzle fire, and then the camera comes down to her face, and she says, "Think it over." For some reason, that little snippet is just in my memory. I remembered that from being a kid. It's just weird. The way she says, "Think it over." I don't know.
In a good way, or is it that like a...
No, not good, bad. I just remember
wedged in there.
Yeah, it's just, for whatever reason, it's just one of those little deja vu moments of that just stuck in my brain.
Maybe that was in like a trailer or something. You just saw it a lot.
I don't think I saw a trailer for this movie.
That's fair.
But yeah, basically she's like, "Hey kid, can you hack into them with your laptop?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she hacks in remotely, and all of a sudden she's so good at hacking into this tech from a different country that presumably works very differently and turns the two samurai cyborgs against each other and they decapitate each other.
I both love and hate this entire sequence just because of what McDaggett's doing the whole time. So the samurai have RoboCop down on the ground, and McDaggett aims a gun at RoboCop and says, don't think of doing anything brave or else we're going to kill your two little girlfriends over there. And it's only then that he notices that they're just tip-tapping away on a laptop, and he's like, what are you doing? Not stopping them, not trying to do anything. So then when the samurais do end up killing each other, then we get the reveal that, you idiots, they had a self-destruct feature, and this entire top floor is going to go kaboom in like 20 seconds.
Yeah, this was also a stupid thing they've been kind of building up, because he had this like briefcase, like sort of laptop thing on him, and he kind of, you know, earlier on it was alluded that, oh, well, you have to go with the nuclear option. And I think on a first viewing, I would maybe assume that that was literally going to be like, okay, we'll just nuke the town and rebuild on top of it. But it's just them detonating, and it's not even that big an explosion, and, you know, relative to, like, you know,
he says everything within 20 yards is going to be atomized. So, like, that's not even like a tenth of a mile. Like, that is literally that floor and nothing else.
Yeah. So I'll admit, I do, as far as the villain getting comeuppance, RoboCop like rolling over onto his jetpack, turning it on so the flames like go straight into his feet, is actually kind of vicious in a weird way that I kind of enjoy. That said, the visual of him like carrying both the girl and Dr. Lazarus on his jetpack as he flies out before the explosion is very funny.
It is, especially because he has like, there's this rush to it, and we've seen how fast the jetpack flies. So I love the moment where he's flying as fast as he can over to them, and then he has to like pause and be like, okay, get on, and then start zooming again.
It's really awkward. Yeah, you can tell that they had to really slow it down so they could grab him. Really, really weird. And then, of course, you know, the explosion happens and McTaggart dies. And the end of the movie is down the street where the fighting was. RoboCop's down there with them, and they're all getting patched up and whatnot. And the CEO of the Japanese company comes in his limo, gets out, tells Rip Torn that he's fired, and then walks over to RoboCop, and you think, oh, what's this going to be? And he bows to him like, oh, you have bested me, RoboCop. I now honor you.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait, what? And that, and then Rip Torn comes over and says, hey, what do we call you? Is it Murphy? And and for a second I thought, wait, are they going to undo the ending of the first movie? This is going to piss me off. And they don't. To be fair, they don't. RoboCop just says, no, my friends call me Murphy, but you, dickhead, you can call me RoboCop. And then cut to credits.
I was kind of expecting it to do one of those things where it's like, my friends call me Murphy, but you can call me, and then smash to show like RoboCop.
I think if it was made 20 years later and they were still doing this scene at the end, they would have done it that way. They'd have cut to the title.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Wait a minute, guys. I thought of a name for our team. Stupid.
That's going to be an X Reels movie one day.
You had it on the schedule and then you took it off, and I'm not going to remind you to put it back on. So,
oh yeah, there's a Fantastic Four movie coming out next year. Oh yeah, we should do it.
I think that I'm going to blame myself for that one. That was
that's your fault. I mean, I might have had that realization at some point again, but you've just willed it into the world. That's on you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah, it's just like the world that this is in. It's kind of reminiscent of the previous movies, but it does just feel a little bit off. Like it's not quite as gritty as a Detroit as before. It feels a lot more simplified, so it feels more like a superhero movie. And like, I'm not saying you couldn't have done a good superhero RoboCop movie. I think it probably could exist, and it probably would divide a lot of the fans, because like a new generation would probably be really into it, and then like everyone who like what RoboCop was would hate it, and it would be this weird divide. But the execution's so lackluster that it just isn't that good, so no one's really willing to stick up for it, except from David, apparently. So
I mean, that's okay. So my major thing, I guess this is just how I prefer movies, is that I will accept a lot of flack, but one of the things that I am absolutely like cannot stand is a disjointed or like completely nonsensical plot. Like, if you just throw together a bunch of scenes and tell me like, okay, that's it, I have such a problem when it's like A to B and then C to D and we never see the B to C part. Like, that's what pisses me off. And that's kind of what RoboCop 2 was to me. Like, yes, they threw out some cool ideas, but the fact that, like, each of those ideas only lasted 20 minutes and felt completely separate from the whole, like the larger plot being at play there, I just could not find a way to get into it.
I get it. Like, apples to apples, you're right. If you give me a movie that has good ideas, that has a coherent structure and plot, versus a movie that has cool ideas but does not have a coherent structure and plot, absolutely, the one with the coherent structure and plot is going to win.
But the execution.
Right? But then but what you're comparing here is apples and oranges. You're giving me a movie that has cool ideas and is interesting but is kind of a mess, versus a movie that's not a mess but is just really bland and is lacking, like, a soul. Then
yeah,
you know, like, I think the interesting movie wins out to me, assuming that, like, don't get me wrong, it could also be boring because it's changing things up too often. Robocop 2 is kind of an interesting beast in that it's refreshing itself often enough that I'm kind of engaged for the most part as I'm watching it. It's not every movie would benefit. Like, it
might just be down to a personal taste thing. Like, personally, I agree with you. This movie doesn't have a soul. I don't think that it's doing anything that is remarkable with it. It is kind of just its own little special mess in a way. But I think that I just enjoy the way it was doing its thing a little bit more than I was enjoying. Enjoy is a hard word there. I didn't hate as much as Robocop 2 was doing, because that was what was really frustrating me, is that every time it did introduce an idea, it just immediately either wrapped it up or threw it away. Okay. This one, it set up these ideas, however bland they may be, and it at least stuck with it and developed it all the way through. Like, that at least shows that they had an idea for what they were doing, they had a vision, and as much as I may not think that it was a great plot, at the very least, it followed through and managed to complete a plot. So I'm going to give it credit at least on that much alone, but that's specifically over Robocop 2. Like, that's what I'm not going to say that this movie is a good movie by any stretch, but it is more of what I would have wanted compared to what Robocop 2 ended up doing in the long run.
I think it's just lost too much of its identity at this point, which I think is the big problem that most people have with it, beyond it just being a lot more shallow and, like you say,
it may also be
nuance.
A thing. I don't have a connection as deeply to RoboCop with, like, an identity standpoint as you might. Like, the fact that this is what the third one was, I'm kind of just like, yeah, okay, fair enough. That's what the third one was, rather than having in my head, this is what RoboCop should be, and the third one is ruining it.
Yeah, it doesn't have the DNA, I guess, to be pretentious about it of what RoboCop is. It's, I mean, don't get me wrong though. Having, last movie I'd watched that little snippet of the TV show. Like, I'll take RoboCop 3 over what I saw of that TV show.
Right.
To a point, anyway. I mean, maybe I had some good episodes later on that I don't know about. That's entirely possible. But at least here, RoboCop wasn't shooting chandeliers to fall into bad guys' heads.
I did notice, at least I believe I saw this earlier, on one of your streaming nights, you were playing the RoboCop video game as well, correct? How would you compare that generically, as much as you compare a video game to a movie?
I mean, well, I think as far as, like, just trying to be of the world, I would say that it's definitely better than RoboCop 3, like, for sure.
Okay.
It's kind of a weird thing to compare, though, because I have complaints about the game, but the complaints I have about the game are more about as a game. Like, it's more about stretches of where the traversals kind of shit because you're walking about as RoboCop. It's at its best when it's, like, more linear and tighter areas where you're just, having fun shooting bad guys and throwing them out of windows and stuff.
When you're able to blast through a solid brick wall.
Yes, when you're able to blast through a solid brick wall, which you do in the game occasionally.
Good. And
Peter Weller's in it, so that's something that's
also lacking from RoboCop 3.
Also lacking from RoboCop 3. So yeah, it's just kind of an interesting, weird thing. But at the same time, though, you fall into this trap of the video game being there to serve the nostalgia of the first two movies. So there's a lot of references. There's a lot of little things that are done because, hey, you want to remember. In the same way that after Ghostbusters 2016, Ghostbusters Afterlife was like, hey, we have to, like, remind everyone that we are connected to those real Ghostbusters movies. So there's a little bit of that. But you get away with it a little bit more because you want to be in the world the movies were in, so you kind of forgive the nostalgia prodding a bit more because it's a different medium and it's clearly a side thing meant to be enjoyed as a different type of way of experiencing the world. So you're a bit more critical of, say, an Alien sequel that's a bit too nostalgia fueled versus Alien Isolation, the video game, where no, you forgive it a little bit because you want to feel like you're in that world. So you kind of like appreciate the aesthetics being so like enslaved to the original movie design and all that stuff. But anyway, yeah, RoboCop 3 is a bad movie, and watching it again, like, it's a bit of a chore at times because it is so bland in the middle, and it's definitely lacking in the fire that even 2 had. But certainly, like, I mean, you can sit and compare it to 2, and you've done it a lot. The only important comparison really is to 1, and obviously to 1, it's like, you know, it's an excellent movie versus just kind of a hollow sequel with a, I don't know, just a nothing to it. It's
It feels like, again, they realized they had a warehouse that was still full of all these RoboCop toys, and they're like, okay, all we got to do is make some jetpacks and a new arm, and we can sell these babies.
Yeah. So, like, I don't like despise it the way that elements of, like, the internet seem to. Like, some people put it on this crucifix, and in the same way that I talk about an Alien Covenant, or I talk about a Die Hard 5, funnily enough. I don't think this is as painful as those, but I can kind of respect why it rubs people that way. And I still don't like it, though, and I still hate that it kills off Lewis the way it does, like she's nothing. I hate that it just tries to kidify things a bit too much, and it feels like, you mentioned, like, like, you remembering a commercial in the middle is actually surprising to me, because I came out of this thinking, oh, they barely had that this time, because all the funny ads from the previous 2, because 2 arguably had funnier ads than the first one did. This was kind of lacking here. Like, the satire element was kind of just lost. So anyway,
again, that's what I'm talking about, the nuance, that little the little bit of that little sting to it, where it's saying, oh, capitalism, isn't it evil? They instead decide to say, like, yes, it's so evil, now it's Nazis.
All right, what was your moment of the movie, scene of the movie?
I'm gonna give it to the entire sequence of OCP stock is in the toilet, and we see, like, the guy jumping out the window, and it ends up with Bradley Whitford shooting himself off camera. I think that whole sequence is where, as much as, I said that it's doing its own thing, I enjoyed that dark humor to it. I enjoyed the moment where they take this moment and they just go full tilt with it. I enjoyed the fact that they didn't hold their punches and literally not show, but very, very, very deeply imply the suicides of 2 characters, just one right after another.
Yeah, I'm going to go with kind of a section that intercuts a little bit, but it's basically RoboCop's intro to his decision to abandon his, like, mission to go save Anne. Even though I do think the idea that, oh, we're in this, like, super scary gang's territory is a little bit silly, at least I can enjoy that in, like, a B-movie level, as much as it feels a little bit more hokey than anything that's in the first RoboCop movie. I do at least enjoy it. Well, one, because I also like seeing the Frankenhooker actor pop up as this sexist asshole. It's kind of funny to me. But I'm a sucker for, like, the robot or a cyborg or whoever making, like, a choice out of, like, caring about a human versus their programming. I'm always a sucker for that type of, like, character choice. So I enjoy that as the introduction to RoboCop in the movie. So I'll give it to that.
All right. Fair enough.
MVP of the movie?
This one's a lot tougher. I don't feel like anybody really stood out as a great character in this. Not even, I would say, RoboCop.
I feel like, if anything, you're either giving it to an actor you like, so you may give it to a Bradley Whitford just because you think he's kind of funny in his role or whatever. I think for me, I'm probably going Nancy Allen, just because I leave this movie, and it's not necessarily even because she's standout. I think she's solid in the scene she's in, but it's more just because my takeaway whenever I think about this movie is I'm mad what they did to her. So I'm like, you know what? She's getting the prize. She's the MVP.
Okay. I'm just searching one thing real quick. Because it's going to influence my decision here. I am going to give the MVP to Hot Toys, the manufacturers of the RoboCop toys.
Very good.
In 1993, because they absolutely were the ones who won the most from this movie.
Yeah. I suppose that's true.
If I do have to pick something from the movie, though, it's still going to be a little bit off, because none of the actors really stood out to me. So I think what I would actually give it to is the score.
Oh,
Having
sure.
that score back, getting that original back. That's
Yeah, because not only are the themes back, there's even a couple of cool little new themes that are sprinkled in that I don't think are bad. So, yeah, no, the score's legitimately still pretty good.
So, yeah, that's my choice.
Even if arguably some of the new themes are maybe a little bit... You can tell they were designed for a movie that is more of a superhero movie, but I can't fault the composer for recognizing what he's composing for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I think that's fair. All right, what are you rating Robocop 3?
I could waffle on and on and on about why I'm giving it the score, but I'm just going to flat out say it. I'm going to give this one a 6.
Okay.
Yep.
You're in the positive. You're saying it's decent.
I mean, as much as I was saying I didn't like Robocop 2, I still gave it a 5.5. So just by necessity, this one needs to have at least a 6 there. And looking at other things I rated a 6, yeah, I think it stands amongst it. Like Robinson Crusoe on Mars got a 6 for me. And I would say this stands easily in that same level.
Yeah, for me, this is a 4 out of 10. I think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. Obviously, I could go lower, but I do think it's under that halfway point. I think it is a 4.
Okay.
So,
fair enough.
There you go. Simple. So yeah, David will get to his homework in a second, but I'll just tell you about Patreon. If you want to support the show, but more importantly, get some bonus content, every month we have 2 bonus shows that we do. One is Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. The other is a show where we review movies that are... Well, they're on a special tier, a special list of movies. Some of the worst things ever made, perhaps you might say. One might even say that... I don't know if Robocop 3 quite falls into its level, but it's just closer than a lot of the movies we do on the show.
I mean, we did specifically mention Fantastic, so...
That's true. That's a movie that will appear on there.
Yeah.
I think obviously some movies that could technically be classed as X Reels level that get done on this show because they're still sci-fi movies. You know, we did Attack of the Clones recently, and I would argue that's X Reels level.
As soon as a movie has a large enough budget,
yes, I know you're going to say the production value scales it out of it, but I would say that for a movie of its budget, Attack of the Clones is X Reels quality.
Look, I agree that Madam Web was definitely in there. Like, I'm not arguing that point. Attack of the Clones, I'm just a little bit more iffy on.
Yes, and maybe in the future, it'll maybe Morbin time.
Oh, God.
Or maybe we'll be craving some more bad movies.
Is it just, are we literally just going to make, like, a who bought Marvel's rights shows and just show all of Fantastic and all that stuff?
Hey, it's not my fault they keep making really bad movies out of Marvel properties.
Christ.
Anyway, so yeah, you can support the show and get bonus content over there. Also, check out Collector's Cut, because we're going through Die Hard season right now. It's a lot like this show, but we go through franchises or maybe like, seasons of movies. So we did like 90s erotic thrillers was a season.
I will say, because of the way things are a little bit janky, we actually just wrapped up Die Hard season when this releases.
Fine, it doesn't matter. Fine, Die Hard season just finished. Okay, you can go check out all 5 episodes. Airport season starting soon.
Yes.
Look forward to that.
If you want some more high-octane thriller.
Yes. So, David, every episode you go back and do a movie that we did in the show before you joined it. What was this week's homework movie?
Well, coming up in a few months' time, I'm sure you've already announced this, is we are doing a top list of the decade so far.
Yes.
And so I need to catch up on that stuff. However, one that I'm not sure if it'll make the list, but I at least want to get there, is Jurassic World Dominion. I don't know if it'll make the list, but in order to do that, need to go through the entire Jurassic Park franchise. So staying in 1993, it's a Unix system.
Wait,
it is the original.
Why did you phrase it that? You could have just said there's a new Jurassic Park movie coming out next year, and I've done all those for that.
Well, if I were to have done it for that, I would have spaced it out a lot more. I am condensing these significantly to get it done before the list.
Yeah, because there's literally Jurassic Park 7 or Jurassic World 4, whatever you want to call it. The actual title's Jurassic World Rebirth is coming out in like July or whatever it is.
Yeah, and that would have given me like 3 extra months, but unfortunately, I don't have that now. So, a lot of Jurassic Park coming your way. It's Jurassic Park. It's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I honestly, I think obviously the special effects and the practical effects are the stars here. It really manages to sell the idea of dinosaurs. Even this much time later, you can point out where the special effects and practical effects differ. It's not like seamless, and it's definitely obvious when special effects are used, but it's still great. Like, for its time, it still really works for what it's doing.
A weird terminology thing here. You're calling the CG special effects. I would call the practical effects special effects if I was using that term.
I guess. Fair enough.
I think what you're saying is visual effects.
Visual effects. Yeah, okay, fair enough. That works. So, yeah, the visual effects stand out. You can definitely tell where it's there. Beyond that, it's solidly written, solidly paced. It's just over 2 hours. Doesn't feel like it. It works out to be basically everything that they set up throughout the movie. It pays off, and that's, I think, one of the signs of best writing, is that it never feels like you're wasting your time with anything. Everything is, even things that seem like they're going to be little throwaway lines in the beginning, like talking about Dr. Grant and him not liking being around kids. That's his whole plot. That's everything he does, is all about the kids. So, yeah, it's just a fantastically made movie.
Subtext, because their father left them, and that's why they're there visiting their grandfather. There's a lot of subtext in Jurassic Park. You might not notice.
Absolutely, a lot like RoboCop 3.
What? Don't know if I agree with that.
No. I honestly, I don't know what I could really say. I'm sure you guys went in depth in your review because you guys gave it some pretty high scores there. I do think I'm going to probably come down at I'm going to say a 9.5.
Okay.
And I think, you know what? I don't know how to justify why it doesn't get a 10. I just didn't grow up with Jurassic Park. I was a dinosaur kid, but that's so far beyond me. That was literally like 25 years ago that I last gave a damn about dinosaurs. So.
Yeah, but that's weird though. You were a dinosaur kid who didn't see Jurassic Park as a kid?
My parents actually gave a crap about what I watched, Pete. And I was like 0 when this came out.
Oh yeah, when it came out, but like by the time you were like enough to like comprehend movies, like
no, like they didn't want me watching people getting eaten, Pete.
I saw this when I was 4. I was 4 when this came out.
And that explains a lot.
Jurassic Park's for kids, though. What the hell are you talking about? I mean,
to some extent, there's the bloody arm scene and the whole thing.
Yeah, but it's a PG. They there's literally a bit of trivia to Jurassic Park where James Cameron was going to make it, and he's on record as saying he was glad it ended up being Spielberg because he was going to make Aliens but with dinosaurs, and Jurassic Park should be for kids, and that's what Spielberg made.
Oh, okay. You mean the movie Aliens? I thought you were saying the dinosaurs themselves were going to be aliens. And I was very confused.
No, the idea is it would be like a Team of Colonial Marines style story going into an island with dinosaurs. But
so Jurassic Park 2.
Well, yeah, but better because it'd have been Cameron making it.
Yeah.
Because anyway, that's absurd to me because Jurassic Park is like the kid-friendly gateway movie into something a little more thrilling. The idea that there's parents out there who said, no, my 5-year-old can't watch Jurassic Park. It's too intense for them.
Look, I can't say for certain that I never saw it as a kid. I'm sure I did to some extent, but I'm just saying it was not something that was like one of those tapes that was on repeat constantly in my house.
Fair enough. It's so weird. My kid's into dinosaurs. And sure, when you're 2, fine, but when you're like 5, like, oh no, he can't watch Jurassic Park.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think by the time I hit 5, that was where the Pokemon craze was all the thing, and I delved into that hard.
All right, well, okay, I don't know if I'm criticizing here your parents for being too conservative, right? That's possible, or you for having shit taste by the time you were 5. But either way, something's amiss here, and I'm calling it out.
I think the first movie I ever saw in theaters was Pokemon, the first movie. So,
look, I get that I was watching things like Die Hard and Halloween a little bit too young. All right, I think that puts that you grow hair in your chest from that. I think there's some value of going a little bit further beyond what you're supposed to. But the idea that Jurassic Park is too extreme for a kid who's old enough to be watching any type of movie.
No. I get what you're saying. I understand entirely. And to be fair, probably like if I pushed hard enough on my parents, I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten
a little bit of menace, grow some character in you.
I've expressly told you before how I am an absolute baby when it comes to horror movies, and that is 100% from my childhood.
You have no idea, people. When he had to go see Alien Romulus, he was like, "Oh, I'm nervous about this. I need to see a horror movie in the theaters. I'm scared.
Big loud noises happen, and I don't have a way to get away from it.
I'm a baby."
When I went to Scotland, we sat down and watched that vampire movie, whatever it was called.
That wasn't a horror movie, though.
But I was terrified, man. Vampires are scary.
That was a Twilight ripoff. Come on, now. I mean, I was scared of it, but not for like horror reasons. I was scared of the quality. I was horrified by that. But that's an X Reels episode, everyone. Go check out X Reels on Patreon.
Ding.
Anyway, I was not allowed to watch Jurassic Park as a child. It was too scary for me.
Look, I might be throwing my parents under the bus for me just not having good movie taste back then. I don't know. But
like, it's entirely possible you just somehow dodged it. It's just funny to hear that you were into dinosaurs and your parents didn't just naturally go, oh, we'll make sure you can see Jurassic Park at some point. Maybe
it was my attention span. Maybe 2 hours was just too much for me.
Oh, jeez. All right, there you go. That's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next week with something here. I'm sure we've got it penned down. Oh, yes. Solaris, the remake, which won the vote. So me and Tara did the original many episodes ago, but we're doing the 2002 George Clooney starring remake next time. So David has to go watch the original to prepare.
Yeah, no points if you guess next week's homework.
So, yes, I really like that original film, and I've never really had much of a desire to see this one for whatever reason, so I'm morbidly curious as to see how it works out, but we'll find out.
All right.
So, yeah, we'll see you next time for that. Thank you for joining us. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.